I hadn't planned to notice him. That's the truth I keep circling back to, because it makes the whole thing feel less like fate and more like accumulation. The way snow doesn't decide to become a snowbank. It just keeps landing in the same spot until one day it's too tall to ignore. My name is Renata. I'm a clinical pharmacist's least favorite kind of customer. A nurse who fills her own prescriptions 2 hours late, still in scrubs, hair escaping its clip. And I worked nights on the cardiac step-down unit at Callahan Memorial. The pharmacy sat between the parking garage and the exit everyone used, so stopping there wasn't a choice so much as a geography. Owen worked the counter most evenings. I knew his name from his badge for probably 4 months before I used it out loud. Here's the embarrassing part. I don't actually remember the first time he handed me a bag. What I remember is the 10th time, or the 20th, when I realized he'd started setting a small paper cone of grocery store Carnations on the counter next to my bottle of iron supplements, the cheap kind, the $2 bunch by the register that nobody buys for anything except guilt or habit. You don't have to do that, I told him, the first time I said anything at all. I know, he said, not looking up from the label he was printing. I like the color. Figured somebody should get some use out of them before they wilt behind the register. That was it. No follow-up, no lingering look, nothing you could point to and call a moment. Just a man handing a tired woman a bundle of flowers he pretended weren't for her, and me pretending I hadn't smiled the whole walk to my car. It went on like that for the better part of a year. Tuesdays and Thursdays, mostly, whenever my schedule and his lined up. I started noticing details I had no business noticing. The chip in his front tooth, the way he tapped his pen twice before writing, the fact that he always asked, "Roll one?" instead of "How are you?" because he'd learned, I think, that nurses lie reflexively to the second question and can't help answering the first one honestly. "Ra one," I'd say, and sometimes that was the whole conversation, and somehow it was enough to get me to my car without crying, which after a bad shift is a higher bar than people realize. The flowers changed eventually. Carnations gave way to daisies, then 1 week. I remember because it was the week my grandmother went into hospice 3 states away. A small paper sleeve of yellow tulips, my favorite, though I was almost positive I'd never told him that. "How did you know?" I asked. He shrugged, sheepish in a way that didn't match a man who otherwise moved through his pharmacy like he owned every inch of it. "You mentioned it. Back in March. You were complaining about the florist by your apartment overcharging for tulips out of season." I hadn't remembered saying that. I certainly hadn't expected anyone to keep it, tucked away for 5 months like a receipt he meant to use later. It rattled me more than it should have. The idea that I'd been talked to and listened to this whole time by someone I'd filed mentally under the Pharmacist, a job title instead of a person. That's when the fear started, if I'm honest. Not fear of him. Fear of what it would cost to admit there was something worth naming. I had a policy, unspoken but firm, against starting anything with anyone attached to the hospital, because I'd watched it go badly for enough co-workers to know the wreckage pattern by heart. The awkward hallway run-ins after a breakup, the shift swaps nobody talks about, the way gossip moves through a nurse's station faster than a code blue gets called. Owen wasn't hospital staff exactly. The pharmacy was a separate lease, different paychecks, but it was close enough that my caution didn't know the difference. So I did what I do best under pressure. I managed it. I kept the visits exactly as they were. Pleasant, brief, safely bracketed by a counter and a badge and a job to get back to. And told myself that was enough, that some things are better left as a nice small thing you don't examine too closely, the way you don't shine a flashlight directly at a firefly. Then my father had his stroke. It wasn't my hospital. It wasn't my unit, and none of my training made it easier to be the daughter in the hallway instead of the nurse behind the desk. I took 2 weeks off. When I came back, hollowed out and moving like my body was borrowed, I went straight to the pharmacy window out of a kind of muscle memory I didn't examine, even though I didn't need anything filled. Owen looked up, and something in his face changed before I said a word. "You look like you need to sit down more than you need a prescription," he said, and came around the counter. Actually came around it, past the little swinging door pharmacists aren't supposed to use for civilians, and got me a chair from the waiting area, I told him. I don't know why. I hadn't told half my own co-workers, but I told Owen, a man whose full name I'd learned off a badge and whose last name I still had to guess at about my father's stroke about the 2 weeks, about how strange it was to walk hospital hallways as the family member instead of the professional, how it flipped something in me I wasn't sure would flip back. He didn't say anything wise. He didn't try to fix it, which I've come to think is its own kind of intelligence. He just sat with me for the 10 minutes his coverage allowed, and when his coworker called him back to the counter, he pressed something into my hand before he stood up. Not flowers this time. A folded piece of paper with his cell number on it, and underneath, in the same handwriting I'd been reading off prescription labels for a year, "Call if you need someone to sit in a waiting room with you." I've had practice. I sat in my car in the parking garage for 20 minutes before I could drive home, and I want to be honest about what I was feeling, because I think a lot of people who've loved someone slowly, someone safe, someone attached to the wrong moment in their life, will recognize it. It wasn't joy exactly. It was terror wearing joy's coat. Because the moment I folded that paper into my wallet, I knew I'd crossed from noticing into choosing. And choosing meant risking the one good, uncomplicated thing in my week turning into something that could actually break. I didn't call for 3 days. I want that on the record too, because the version of this story where I called immediately isn't the true one. I sat with it. I asked myself the question I still don't think has one right answer. Whether it's braver to protect a good thing by leaving it small, or to risk it by letting it grow into something that could actually hurt you. I've heard both answers argued by people I respect, and I'm still not sure which one I believe. What decided it, in the end, wasn't courage. It was my father, 3 days into recovery, gripping my hand with the strength coming back into his fingers and saying, apropos of nothing, "You've been smiling at your phone. Who is he?" Fathers notice more than we give them credit for, even from a hospital bed, even mid-stroke recovery. And I laughed for the first time in 2 weeks and told him it was nobody. And he said, "Renata, I raised you. It's somebody." I called Owen that night. Not for a waiting room, just to talk. We ended up on the phone for 2 hours, past midnight, both of us with early shifts, neither of us willing to be the one to hang up first. We've been together 9 months now. He still slides flowers across the counter sometimes, though I pick up my own prescriptions now, on purpose, on my day off, so there's no shift fog and no urgency to it, just 2 people who like each other's company glad for an excuse. My father asks about him at every visit, and I think about that year of small, unnamed kindness often. How easy it would have been to let it stay small forever, safe in its little paper cone, never risked and never lost. I don't regret waiting, but I don't know that I'd tell anyone else to wait as long as I did, either. Some things you only recognize as a story after you've already agreed to be in it.